Good afternoon, everyone. Treasure Troller here. We are in Scottville, Michigan. We are at MacPhail Field. And if there's any real big baseball nuts out there, if the name MacPhail sounds familiar, well, yeah, it's that same MacPhail family. Maybe we'll do a vlog later on about the connection. But today we're not here to talk about baseball. We're here to talk about football. One particular individual who played his high school games here on this very field, who was a 3-star athlete here at Mason County Central. He went on to further his football playing at the University of Michigan. He played at Michigan from 1966 to 1969. He was part of the football team that unfortunately lost to the Team South 50-14. And then the next year, in 1969, was part of the team that many say was Bo's biggest victory when they upset the team from the South. So after after college, he went on to a 51-year coaching career in college football. He's had stops all over the country. He's coached at Michigan, Western Michigan, Purdue, Wisconsin, Colorado, where he won a national championship, Arizona, Texas A&M, Kansas, and the last 12 years he was defensive coordinator at Northwestern University. He has 400 career wins, and he's retired maybe 2 years ago. So today I'm going to have a kind of a lighthearted interview with Coach Mike Hankwitz. So here's the interview. All right, so we're here with the one and only Doctor of Defense, Coach Mike Hankwitz. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
All right, so we're going to do an easy interview today. It's one I've wanted to do for a while. So you enjoying retirement, wife ready to make you go back to work?
Oh, I think she would have probably been happy if I did, but I think 51 years is enough time, and it's time to be able to enjoy doing other things. And I did it as long as I did because I loved what I was doing. I never felt like work. I was with great people and great young men everywhere, and it's hard. You didn't feel like you were ever going to work, and it was fun because you were still competing all those years too, and I enjoyed it. I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change anything about it.
Now, I brought you back here at MacPhail Field because this is where it all started. How long has it been since you've been at MacPhail Field?
It's been a while. I remember coming out here and playing Little League, and then my dad would bring me to a high school game, but we were more interested in playing catch football down there in the end zone than watching what was going on. And
well, I thought if you wanted, for old time's sake, if you want to do a few wind sprints before the interview started,
I think I'll pass. I think I've done enough of those down through the years, and well, we used to have the track around here.
Yeah, the old cinder, yeah.
We ran track on this.
Yes, I ran track on cinder as well.
Yeah. Well, there was hardly any, I think the first one's asphalt, There was some form of asphalt. And, we thought they were pretty cool, but, man, I think it would have been hard on your shins, too,
The first time I was ever here at MacPhail Field, I was a wee youngin', and I was part of the crown bearing crew that crowned your sister homecoming queen.
Oh, wow. That would have been after I left then, right?
Yeah.
So, well, I was back here in college. my roommate Jim Andich came home with me one weekend, and we came out here and threw the ball around and stuff. And I had to show him my small hometown. Now he was from Solon, Ohio, much bigger high school, much bigger school.
And he went to the Dolphins, didn't he?
Yes, he played with the Dolphins all those years and was on their Super Bowl teams. And then he ended up doing, I believe, radio for them, play-by-play or color or something, for years.
So we don't need to talk about all the highlights of your high school career, but back today with recruiting, there's Huddle, there's YouTube, there's all the social media. So what was recruiting like back, about 65?
Yeah.
What was it like
back then? You didn't have the social media. You didn't have all that stuff. One email. So the colleges would send letters out to the high school coaches and ask them to recommend players. And then they would, they would request film. Back then you had the 16 millimeter film, so the coach couldn't send, he'd send 2 games to one school, 2 to another. And when they got back, they would keep trying to get them out. And recruiting was much different back then. Nobody recruited anybody before their senior year because there were a lot of multi-sport athletes and stuff. And geez, back then, young men didn't mature as early as they are now, 50 years ago or whatever now. A 200-pound lineman in high school would have been pretty good size because they felt like he'd get to 240. Now you got 300-pound linemen in high school that are much more physically developed than they were back then. And so a coach would you might send your name out, and then you might get a questionnaire from the school, and then all of a sudden, then I started getting some coaches coming up here to visit. Coach Hank Fondy from Michigan came up, and then Coach Doolittle, I believe it was, and then I started getting letters, and then it was, well, come on down for a weekend. So I went, I visited Western, I visited Central, and I visited U of M. Michigan State, I didn't get any interest from them. I got letters from the academies. And
you were smart too, huh?
Well, we try to take pride in our academics too. And then I got a scholarship offer by mail from Nebraska. Never,
Wow.
Now things were different back then because the Big Ten had a 120 scholarship limit, so they were giving out 30 scholarships a year because freshmen weren't eligible. There was no redshirting other than medical redshirting. Where Nebraska, because scholarship limits at that time were league-driven, Nebraska could give out 100 scholarships a year.
Uh-huh.
Oklahoma, Nebraska, Texas, and they did, and it was, and I believe it was like 70, it was sometime in the 70s when the NCAA put a institutional limit on scholarships.
The Title IX?
125.
Oh, well then Title IX came in?
Well, it gradually went from like I think it went from 125 to 115 to 105. Then it ended up at 95, or it's at 90 or 95 right now. Or maybe 85 now, come to think of it. But, there's, the last year of that, where it was league rules, the University of Pittsburgh signed Tony Dorsett. Hugh Green was in that class, and supposedly he was like one of the 99th guy they offered that accepted a scholarship, and he became an All-American and a great pro player. So that's the thing about recruiting, is you can't predict all those things, how they're going to develop and stuff. But it was a lot different back then because you didn't have internet, you didn't have the social media and the Huddle and all that stuff to look at film. So you had to rely on getting film from high schools. Then when the season was over, the coaches would go out to all their areas and watch film at the school so they could see as much film as possible. And then in February, March, the kids would make their visits, and I want to think that the national signing day back then was the middle of April. So because all these coaches are on the road to get out and see all that film. Now today you have the advantage of Huddle and the internet where they can send you stuff, and schools have recruiting staffs and people that will look at all the film and then send it to the assistant coach, the ones they think we should be looking at and stuff. So you've got a lot more people involved, and young men are physically developing a lot faster than they used to. And so you're getting kids getting scholarship offers after their freshman year, more after their sophomore. And, it wasn't until the 80s when I was at Purdue that we started recruiting juniors, but it's just kept going lower and lower because kids are maturing faster, and with 85 scholarships, the competition, people feel like they got to start offering them earlier, and it's a whole new ball game now. And now the signing date is, you have an early signing date, and then you have first Wednesday, I think it is, in February. So you're recruiting year round now. You have to, you're allowed to call recruits, so you're calling them, you're emailing them, you're texting them, and it's and sometimes I don't know that it's great for some young men because they just get so caught up in all this recruiting, and they got to post how many offers they've had and stuff. I mean, you kind of wonder if they're as focused on playing as they should be, but different times.
Okay, so you went to Michigan, and there's kind of two games in there that really are, I don't know if you want to call it the highlights. It was the 68 game with the Team South.
Yeah.
And that was down in Columbus. And I know you guys scored 14. I forget how many Ohio State scored.
Yeah, well, 50. It was 21-14 at halftime. We had a good team. We lost our opener, but then we reeled off 8 straight. We had a great captain named Ron Johnson, was a great running back and a great person, and we were playing right there with them at halftime. And then the second half, I think we turned it over, and they the momentum swung totally, and then the story goes, well, Woody went for 2 to get to 50, and
because he couldn't go for 3.
Right.
Yeah.
And that stuck in our craw because we knew we were a lot better than that, and to run it up like that, he didn't have to. So when Coach Schembechler came, and made that a red letter game, because in reality that game would decide a lot of times the share of the Big Ten championship and national things. And we hadn't forgotten the game, but they made sure we didn't. We had a big plywood thing with 50 on it where you had to duck under to get out of the locker room, and then on the floor mats 50-14 or something. I mean, as if we needed to be reminded of it. But we had a heck of a team, and we I'm trying to remember, we lost to State by 1 point or something. We lost to Missouri, a real good team, early, but we beat Purdue the next week, I believe. We had a heck of a team. And then we lost a close game to Michigan State, but then we kind of got on a roll, and we beat Iowa out there. And I remember in the locker room afterward, somebody started chanting, "We won Ohio State." I mean, we were already thinking about them. We hadn't even left Iowa yet, and we had a great week of practice, and it was one of those weeks where it snowed. The freshmen are out there shoveling parts of the field off so we can practice, and it was cold. I mean, we were trying to be creative. You couldn't wear gloves as a receiver because all the gloves you had were those brown cotton gloves. You couldn't catch anything, and so we're taking the plastic bags that your dry cleaning comes in, and we're cutting holes in them and putting them to have windbreaks, because they didn't, back then you didn't have this multitude of all-weather gear like you do now.
Yes.
And so we're just trying to do the best we can so we can practice hard, and oh yeah, that's a game that we'll never forget, because everybody had busted their tails for the whole year and made a commitment to beating them, and then it started off, they got ahead of us, and but we weren't phased, and slowly we just kept. And in fact, I remember, what was it, 12-0 or something, or was it? I know they scored 12 in the first half, and I remember Coach Young pounding on the blackboard, "No more, they won't get any more," and they didn't. And then Barry Pearson from St. Ignace had the 3 interceptions, the big punt return, and so yeah, that was that's obviously a memory you'll never forget, and our team takes tremendous pride in that. We're very close, and I enjoy hearing from my teammates. I'm looking forward to seeing them wherever I can.
So that was, well, at the end of '68, that was Bump Elliott's. He left.
Right.
So then Bo comes in. So what was it like the first time meeting Bo, or the first team meeting Coach Schembechler had?
Bump was a great man, and he was a heck of a coach. He'd been a great Michigan player and stuff. But Bo was just a different personality. Did things a little differently. Was more dynamic and more outspoken. Not in a negative way, but they were just two different personalities. But Bo was kind of infectious that way, because he got you going, and but he, when he had the first meeting, you knew he was in charge, and we were going to do things a little differently. And that, he said, that's no disrespect meant to Bump, because I just believe in doing things different, a certain way, and that's the way we're going to do them,
No.
And that's when I think Coach Young came up with the saying, those who stay will be champions. And we had tougher practices. In fact, it was his first spring, and so with recruiting and stuff, we stayed after we were on trimesters, so we stayed for, was it a week, or was it a week and a half after that, and finished our spring practice. So we didn't have any school, because we had, with exams and stuff in there, you didn't want to have it conflicting, and yeah, it was harder. They ran a little more different type practices, and they were tougher, but we believed that if we did what he asked us to do, it would pay off, and it did.
Yeah. So that ended, 69 was your last year. You go into coaching. A lot of different schools. I want to go, in 1990, you won a national championship with Colorado. You left, and then you came back to Colorado under Coach McCartney.
Well, that was with Coach McCartney. We won the national championship.
Okay.
And then I went back to Colorado and Coach Barnett.
Gary Barnett. So then Barnett leaves. How disappointed were you personally that after Gary left, that Colorado passed you over for the head coaching job and gave it to the pretty boy Rick Neuheisel?
Well, that was when Coach McCartney stepped down. That was the first time that happened. And yeah, that was frustrating, because I'd been there 10 years, the last 7 as the defensive coordinator, and I think that the last 7 years we had like the 4th best record in the country or something, and played for a couple national championships, and won 11 games, 3 times or something. So yeah, it was disappointing, Now I can look back now and wish there were some things I would have done differently in preparing to be a head coach, because there were 4 of us on the staff that applied for the job, and yeah, it was frustrating, but you know that you can get better or you can get better, and I felt like, all right, I'm just going to keep trying to get better, and maybe another opportunity will come, yeah, hindsight being what it is, I wish I'd have done some different things and prepared more to be a head coach. But when those opportunities quit coming, I said, I'll just be the best lieutenant I can be. And so, yeah, there's some things that can happen. And if you dwell on them, it prevents you from moving on. So at some point, you just got to move on and learn from it.
So what was the closest you ever came to moving up to the NFL?
I got 2 or 3 times when people asked me if I would want to interview, and the timing, well, and that was I was at Arizona 4 years, I was at Purdue 5, Western 3, Colorado 10, and then it was somewhere, then I was at A&M 6. So there was some, you were going to be some stability. We were going to be places, pretty, and in the NFL wasn't always that stable. You might be there 2 years and moving and stuff. And I thought, I like the stability of college, and I like working with the college-age young men. And I didn't pursue them. Well, college ended up turning into be like the NFL, and it's the stability wasn't always what you hoped it would be, but I just enjoyed the college thing, and yeah, there's things about the NFL probably would have been interesting, and but I just never pursued it, never looked back.
Okay, so I know I told you this question earlier, and you were kind of stumbling on it, but you got a couple names of players, recruits, that got away from you, that turned out to be really good players.
Oh man, yeah, that's going to take some thinking here.
You wined them, you dined them.
Yeah, well.
And then they still got away.
Well, there was probably one at every school, so trying to think of the ones at the different schools is what's slowing me down here, because we were recruiting against the Texases and the Oklahomas and the Nebraskas and the Notre Dames and the Big Ten schools. So there was always tremendous competition. Yeah, you got me stumped on that one. I'm gonna think about that one.
All right. So how about a player that you're watching the game film on the upcoming opponent or whatever, and you looked and you saw the guy and you go, I don't know how we're going to stop this guy.
Okay, let me think here. When I was at Colorado and we were getting ready to play Barry Sanders, we had played him the year before because he was the backup tailback and returned punts. And so when the starting running back got hurt, he played some games and we're thinking, man, I think he's better than their starter. And then when we play him the next year, and he was unbelievable. And we lost a close game to him, but we didn't stop him as much as we needed. I know that. Rocket Ishmael was pretty dang talented. Oh man, there's more. Let me think about that. Nebraska had some great players. Well, when we played Southern Cal one year, when I was at Arizona that one year in 03, Reggie Bush and some of those guys, it's like, wow, and it wasn't just one player. there are so many, you know, I mean, 51 years, there's probably
One or two that slipped
one
your
about
mind?
every year where you go, wow, this guy's pretty darn good, you know. Now we we defended a lot of them pretty well, but then there were some that, you know, were so pretty darn talented.
Okay. So, kind of got a few questions here, kind of general questions. I know some of them are going to affect college sports in general, but so what's your opinion on these NIL deals, these name, image, likeness deals?
I think it's going to wreck college football because I think there was a lot of value in a young man getting a full scholarship. Because not only did they get a full scholarship, they had the best in strength and conditioning, they had academic tutoring, they had sports psychologists, now they have nutritionists. And it was 5-6 years ago, the NCAA said, you know, college players today, it isn't like it was when I was in school, when most kids went home during the summer and you worked a summer job and worked out, so you had spending money to spend during the year.
Yeah.
The NCAA said, well, we need to they came up with a term, actual cost of attendance. I don't know, say $6,000 a year or something. That would allow you to go out, take a date out to dinner, go to a movie, because you weren't working in the summer. Most places, kids go to school year round, and like at Northwestern, those kids were smart enough they get their undergraduate degree in 3.5 years because they were taking classes all 4 quarters. Then some of them would get their master's by the time they graduated. So they were taking full advantage of it. So to me, that was a step in the right direction. And I'm an old school guy. I think football is the ultimate in team sports. I used to think basketball was, and I still think it's a great team sport because you're not going to be good unless the 5 guys work together. And that's what I enjoyed about that sport. But football, it takes a lot of guys to win games. It isn't just the 22 starters and your kickers. You know, it's the backups that come in and play well when a guy gets hurt. It's the young men that run the scout team that help you get ready for the game. And some of the players I have the fondest thoughts above are ones that they didn't have great success in college, but they stuck it out. They knew they were contributing, and when we've had championship reunions, they come back and they take as much pride in that championship ring because they knew they helped us get there. So the NIL to me it's going to destroy college football the way we know it. Now everybody's worried about me and about how much money am I going to get. You know, they don't care about the team anymore, and they're not going to learn the same lessons they used to about sticking things out. You know, I'm not playing here, I'm going to transfer. Well, you're going to have to go compete somewhere else too. You think it's just going to automatically get handed to you? You know, it's almost an entitlement thing, and I don't see how that helps them at all, and I don't see how it helps college football. I wish the NCAA would have raised the actual cost of attendance, you know, double it, maybe triple it. Now, all these young men say, well, college football gets so much in TV revenue, but that TV revenue goes to the athletic department to support a lot of other sports. I mean, you can't tell me it doesn't support a lot of great women's sports that deserve it. You know, they don't have the same TV revenue. March Madness and football bring in a lot of money, but it isn't just going to football. And so these football players think, well, we should have a share of that. It's going to support a lot of other people. And that, to me, seems to be lost in this whole discussion, you know. And what frustrates me is who's getting all the big money? Quarterbacks, maybe a running back, you know. Your O-line, and that quarterback isn't going to be any good unless the O-linemen block, do what they're supposed to, and the running back and the receivers do what they're supposed to, and they catch the ball. And those quarterbacks, they got coached by some pretty darn good coaches coming up, and like that, they don't care about them anymore because it's all about them. They're great, and so they're the ones that deserve the money, you know. And I think it's sad. Myself, I think if the NCAA could have made it more reasonable for everybody. Now, there are some young men that are in this NIL that are sharing it with their teammates, or they're doing it for a charitable thing, and I give them tremendous credit. But, you know, you look at the transfer portal, and one of the early stats I saw was like 35% of the ones that ended up at a Power 5 school. Another 35% ended up at a D1 school, might be a non-Power 5, whatever. And then there was some FCS, but then there were 35%. Then there were 35% that got nothing. So they went into this portal, giving up a full scholarship, ended up with nothing. And there's, the university is making a commitment to them on the scholarship in that they're guaranteed a 4-year scholarship. There are some stipulations. They become academically ineligible. They get in serious trouble with the law, and there's some things, or you quit the team. There's some things that to me are obvious, but there's no. So they're making this. The university's making this commitment. These young men aren't. They're signing a letter, and they could be there 6 months. They could be there a year.
Yeah. I was gonna ask you about the transfer portal next, but how do you think that? With all those kids moving, how do you think the transfer portal kind of affects junior college kids trying to get their scholarship at the next level?
It's probably making it harder, which is sad, because those guys work hard to go to junior college and get their grades up, and they deserve it. There's some good players that do that. And because a lot of times young men don't understand the importance of academics when they're freshmen or sophomore, and then all of a sudden they realize they got an opportunity and they just can't quite get their grades where they need to be. So, it's only fair that they should have that chance. But yeah, it's going to make it harder for them. Well, what I worry about is going to affect the non-Power 5 schools, the Mid-American, the Mountain West, and then the FCS schools. The North Dakotas, North Dakota States, South Dakota, those teams that have had great programs. Anybody that goes there now that's playing well, I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna go end up at Ohio State. Where those people did a great job of evaluating players, taking players that got overlooked by the Power 5 schools, and then coaching them, and then how many they've had first-round draft picks out of those places. Now, how many of those guys are going to stay there anymore with the transfer portal? It's like, I think it's sad, but I know I'm old school. But
okay, and then next year, 2024, UCLA and USC join the Big Ten. So what do you think about these super conferences, if you will?
I think they were unfortunately inevitable, because of the TV revenue and the TV contracts. And once the SEC kind of started going that way, like when the Big Ten added Penn State and Rutgers. Okay, Penn State was an independent and big power in the East, and so you can see the logic of it. It expanded the Big Ten TV market from the Midwest all the way to the East Coast. But yeah, the travel now and the expense that it's going to add to all sports, not just football, but women's sports and men's sports. And I hated to see it, and thought what we had was pretty darn good, but
okay. I got one last question for you. And it goes like this. I know you're going to go, well, it kind of depends on which team I'm coaching. But you're laying in bed at night, and a bright light enters the bedroom, and the Lord comes down and says, Coach, I got good news for you, and I got bad news for you. The bad news is you're only going to win one game this season. The good news is you get to pick the team that you beat and the score.
Oh, man.
Who's the team and what's the score?
Oh, that would be hard, because when you coach in different leagues, there's different rivalries.
Just say it. Just get it out.
Well, I would have to say Ohio State.
Yeah. What would the score be?
I wouldn't care, as long as you win, one or 21. To me, the margin is irrelevant.
I figured being as a defensive coordinator, you'd want to pitch the shutout.
Well, that would be ideal, but man, in this day and age of offenses and the skill level of high school quarterbacks, they're coming into college prepared to play in college offenses, where in the past that wasn't always the case. They had to develop some of their skills. Now, high schools are running sophisticated offenses, and they're getting coached well. And then there's quarterback camps and all that stuff. But these kids have had experience coming into college, so they're able to learn the system and throw the ball effectively. And that amazes me, and well, then you got the skill of the receivers and running backs and the size. They're all bigger, faster now, you got receivers running 4.3s and 4.4s, and they're not 5'1" or something, it's so yeah, it's hard to pitch shutouts anymore. My hand's out to those people that can do that in this day and age,
Okay. All right, well, that's it. I'm a full house backfield kind of guy, so I'd rather see you get all back to 3 yards in a cloud of dust.
Well, if you can run the ball and you have a ball control offense, Wisconsin made their living on that for years because, they were always able to run the ball and they could throw it, but the time of possession, it was keep away. They were keeping the ball away from the other team. And it makes it a lot easier to play defense the less plays they have and the more your offense is out there. And not that they couldn't throw it, but they made their strength was running the ball and eating up clock and taking keeping the ball away from the other team. That's one of the negatives of when you throw it a lot. If you have one of those off days and you're 3 and out, you didn't take much time off the clock, and you're giving the other team the ball more often, more possessions, and so it's a catch-22. Yeah, when you're doing it, when you're clicking, you're moving the ball, but you got to be able to score because you move the ball between the 20s and you don't punch it in, all that doesn't help either. So, there's now that doesn't say that some of those passing teams don't have running attacks. They do because you have to commit to stopping the pass that not always as stout against the run as you'd like. And then the skill level of quarterbacks, when you get a quarterback that can run and throw, then you got not only the scramble, but you got their options and the read options and the zone reads and different things where you add another gap to the run defense by that quarterback having to account for him all the time. And then you got the RPOs off that where it's a run pass option. They're running the ball, but they got a pass option off it based on if the defense reacts in a certain way, and that guy might be wide open. So that was a fun part of coaching was seeing the evolution of offenses and stuff, and being able to felt like I got better as I went along, and had some of my best years the last part because we were stopping some of those pretty good darn teams.
All righty, well, that's it. Coach Hankwitz, thanks for taking the time. I've wanted to do this interview for a long time. We just didn't able to meet up. I know it wasn't because I had to try to track you down. That's it. Thanks a lot, Charger Troller, saying aloha and good day.
Go Blue and go Spartans, Mason County Central.
Alrighty.